All right, welcome everyone. Today we have TJ from Checkpoint Software. TJ, thanks for coming on and being a guest today.
Sure, pleasure. Glad to be here.
So before we get started, and I guess I don't need to introduce Kirk because Kirk, you and I it's always you and I, but TJ, why don't you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm from Israel. That's the annoying accent and attitude. And I've joined Checkpoint a couple of years ago. Actually, I know Kirk from before because I did my startup in the cloud workload protection space, and we got acquired by Checkpoint a couple of years ago. And that's how I joined Checkpoint. Been in the cybersecurity space way more than I'd like to remember. It's been a while, 30 years almost. And so I actually got to the point, we talked a bit about that earlier. My son actually works for Checkpoint now.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's how old I am. So, and yeah, and now so I joined Checkpoint through the acquisition of my company, Protego Labs, and since then a lot of movement, and we'll talk a lot about what we do on the cloud. But now I run the cloud business for Checkpoint. So
okay, cool.
That's where we are.
Well, congrats on selling your company. Can you tell us a little bit about that company?
Yeah, sure. Protego Labs. So we were founded in 2017 to deal with cloud workload security, basically dealing with a lot of the areas of serverless security and container security, which was in 2017 was really at the beginning of where the market is going right now. And developed, so myself and my co-founders, actually my co-founders were the brain, I was just the looks. So they were the ones who developed real kick-ass technology around protecting these ephemeral workloads. And now it's part of our solution. It's part of the CloudGuard platform for Checkpoint, securing cloud workloads.
Very cool. So when they acquired you guys, what was it that specifically Checkpoint was looking for at the time?
So Checkpoint actually went through a series of acquisitions to build the cloud business. If you look at the Checkpoint portfolio, what we call today CloudGuard, our platform, it's a series of acquisitions. The original acquisition was a year before my company. It was a company called Dome9 in the cloud security posture management space, one of the original, the OG of cloud security posture management, which is all about, hey, is my stuff configured properly, right? Preventing an attack from happening through better configuration, which is really, we can talk a lot about that, but that's a lot of where the focus is today. And then there was a clear understanding that the next layer is to protect what's actually running in the cloud. Okay, I'm gonna make sure that everything is configured properly, but now I'm actually running workloads in the cloud. How do I protect these workloads? And these workloads are now running on virtual machines historically, but more and more running on these new types of workloads like serverless functions and containers. And that's exactly where my company was. That's the problem my company was solving to. So when after we got acquired, we actually got integrated into the platform. And now that technology is the workload security part of the Checkpoint CloudGuard platform on top of what used to be Dome9. Everything now is CloudGuard, but all these acquisitions came together into a platform. So it makes perfect sense. If you look at the evolution, you first make sure, I mean, think about it, it's even before the cloud, it's true. You first make sure that everything is configured correctly, and then you start protecting what's running actually in your data center or in your environment. So that's sort of where we play in.
Cool. So Kirk, before we kind of get in the weeds here, so TJ mentioned earlier that you guys know each other from that previous company. So was SynerComm working with them at that time?
Yeah, it was actually, we were doing one of our IT summits at Lambeau Field, and a mutual friend, Jim Hebler, said, we got this guy that, he's got a startup company, he's a little ahead of his time, but he's a great speaker and he's going to come out, and he's a good visionary, which you can obviously tell, given the fact that, he's in container security and serverless security 3 or 4 years ago. And he'll give a good presentation. He'll give people some good food for thought. And that's what we're going to try and replicate here today, is just now take that presentation he did with us at IT Summit at Lambeau Field about 3 years ago and give another shot at it and say, okay, now that he's kind of, we're through the first round of dust, where's the second, where are things headed? And
right.
What do our clients need to be aware of so they don't get themselves in trouble? How do you not get yourself in trouble, especially with this hybrid cloud where some of the tools are just being developed now or not even developed? So maybe some of the principles and things that people need to be aware of to at least make sure they're designing that into their infrastructure as they go forward.
Yeah, it was a great event at Lambeau Field. I still remember it. Yeah, it was just an awesome event. Yeah, it was cold, but it was cold.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll get a Lombardi trophy this year. I'm thinking really
Right, right. There, you guys have a chance. This is the year, man.
There are 3 more Pro Bowlers coming back yet, so we'll see.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I know, I know you've always been involved in this innovation, a little forward thinking. So
Right.
kind of, now that you've kind of taken the initial, you talked about the configuration, now running workloads, what are the challenges you're solving now or addressing for people, and where do you, what do they need to be aware of?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, if you look at cloud security, I think generally speaking, the best thing to look at, the best way to look at it is try to understand that the pillars that you're trying to solve to didn't really change. You're still trying to do the same things, we've done for the last 30 years. You're trying to do network security, you're trying to do application security, you're trying to do posture management, all this stuff we've always done. I think what cloud does, it's almost like COVID cloud in the sense that it accelerates everything and condenses it, right? Like what happened in the last 2 years, we took like stuff that theoretically projects would take 20 years, and we just had to do them in like, whatever, 3 months. And suddenly everything got condensed. That's what cloud sort of does. So it not only moves very fast and people are adopting it really fast, the biggest thing is it allows the developers to move really fast. And everything is just faster. So I call it the times 100 problem. And I'll talk about this for a second, because I think that's the biggest drive for innovation in the cloud. The times 100 problem means that it's the same, just 100 times. 100 times bigger, 100 times faster, 100 times scale, 100 times amounts of administrators. We used to live in this data center, we had like 4 admins. Suddenly every developer is an admin, is a privileged user. We had 4 privileged users, we have 10,000 privileged users, and they change all the time, and they have flip-flops and goatees, and they don't care about security or anything like that, and they just move. So it's 100 times problem. So I think the biggest challenge for cloud security, to touch on that innovation that you're saying, and I really think that that's where the innovation is going to come from, probably in the entire cybersecurity space, but specifically in cloud, is how do you deal with times 100? Times 100 speed, times 100 velocity, times 100 scale, times 100 users, times 100 everything. And the key, I think, is going to be automation. So I think the saying that people should have in mind to the question, Kirk, is that, and that's a saying I use for a while, it ain't done till it's automated. So that's the definition of done. It ain't done till it's automated. So your customers or prospect, anyone that's looking at this problem should put in front of them, it says, okay, what am I working on right now? What does it look like when it's done? It's automated. Because if it's not automated, there's no way to deal with times 100. There's just no way. By the way, it's times 100 now, it's times 1,000 tomorrow.
Okay.
And then times 10,000. So I think the short answer to where is innovation going to come from is automating stuff. Automating solving the problem, not necessarily from the actual solution, but how do you automate it for scale?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's just, and then when you go from there, the 100 times, I mean, that says it all, really. It ain't done till it's automated. I agree with that. Because there's nothing like permanent, like temporary, right? Well, we're just going to get done and move back, and then you'll have a mess on a scale that you can't deal with. How does things like machine learning and AI, do they play into that automation, or how do you learn what you don't know, and how does that play in?
So I think it plays so I think that there's areas where machine learning and AI play a very, very important role. There's areas where they honestly don't, because they're just less relevant. So I'll give 2 examples, maybe on areas where they play a great role and in areas where they don't. So when you look at automation, the question is also, okay, so we define the definition of done. It ain't done till it's automated. By the way, which means it's almost never done, because there's always more stuff to automate. There's always better automation, more accurate automation. Right. But there's 2 elements of automation that people need to look at. And actually, I think this will resonate. One part is what makes sense very easily in our mind, which is, hey, I don't want to sit down and configure protection rules. I don't want to change policies, because things change so fast. I just needed to automatically adapt to changes, right? That's sort of the first part of automation. The second piece, which is a lot of people don't think about it in advance, is that you want to automate the presence of security. So if you think about it, like historically, what happened historically, Kirk? I mean, you've been helping customers for whatever, 20 some years, right? Yep. So what happened historically? Someone would put an application, and then someone would come in and put the protection, right? So you sort of had that flow. That flow is dead in the cloud. Just doesn't happen anymore. It's dead. It's all automated. It's all CI/CD pipeline. The developer wants an application. It's there tomorrow. There's no person to call and hey, put protection. So protection has to be there automatically, as automated as the deployment of the application, which is really what cloud did. It automated the entire pipeline. So protection needs to be there automatically. So the reason I'm going there is because you have two things. To automate the presence of security, that's not an AI or machine learning thing. That has to be, your security has to become part of your pipeline, of your deployment process. Your security has to be, for example, I need to identify automatically that someone put something there and then attach security to it automatically. That part is less machine learning and AI. That's way more about what people like to call today shift left security, CI/CD integration, DevSecOps, and just automating the presence of security. And that's a lot of time getting neglected. The second piece is, okay, now that security is there somehow automatically, I want to automate the policy side, because I just don't have time for someone to sit down and now reconfigure firewall rules or reconfigure application security rules or doing all that stuff. So the policy side, and then a lot of machine learning and AI comes into play. To automate the policy side, the security policy side, what's good, what's bad, what's normal, what's not normal, what should I stop, what should I let go, right? That's very much AI machine learning is going to play a big part. So automating the presence is not automating the policy for sure, AI and machine learning.
Okay, like the policy enforcement, things like that.
Yes.
Now, what about when you get a vulnerability or something like this log4j? How does that play into this whole automation scheme? You can automate the controls in, but it's hard to, you can't automate the day zero stuff. And so how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think it proves two things. The log4j, by the way, log4j is really a Death Star attack. I don't know if people that are not, I mean, I'm sure that people that are in the space, they understand sort of like how bad it is. But it's sort, there's a lot of articles now about this company NSO, the Pegasus malware that you can remotely send a text to someone, boom, you take control of his phone, listen to everything. That's literally log4j. Right. For servers. That's how bad it is. And it's prevalent everywhere. Like, I don't think there's a company in the world that that's not exposed to that vulnerability. And literally you need to send one command and you're in, you're done. So it is a Death Star attack. It doesn't happen very often, but every 4 or 5 years, there's a Death Star attack. What this proves, though, to your question, is that one, this is a never-ending story. Like, this is why cybersecurity is such a great space to be in if you want to have job security. This is never-ending. This is forever. And the more developers run faster, the more open source is out there, the more stuff get deployed so fast, you're going to have more of that. So from a security perspective, though, you want to have two things. One, and we're not necessarily fully there, right? But you want to have protections that are preventative, but do not rely on pure signature world. Now, we've been saying this on the antivirus world forever, right? For endpoints, because you want to be able to protect against zero-day attacks and stuff that you've never seen before. But it's really hard. So even today, I would say that in the application security space, like the web application firewall world, where where you would expect to stop stuff like that, 99.99% of the solutions out there would not stop this on day one, because they've never seen this before, right? By the way, Checkpoint, our solution, our application security solution, back to your machine learning AI, actually stopped this without knowing the attack, without knowing anything, because it's not looking for signatures. It actually has a patented technology that looks for attack indicators. Day one, we stopped this attack and all its variants, which is really interesting. So, but generally speaking, you want to have technology that doesn't rely on signatures to stop things, because zero day is going to happen. But the second thing is remediation. Let's assume that you're exposed and you're not stopping it. How do you automate remediation? That is the biggest thing right now. Like, and that's where people are struggling. How do you go and patch? First, look at what's going through people's head right now. It's a huge challenge. If I'm a big company, I'm Uber. I have tens of thousands of servers. My first question is, which servers have this vulnerability? Right. Then, how do I update it? And now every time I update a piece of software, I need to do regression testing to make sure that the application doesn't go down, right? So the first thing that comes into mind, if you're a security person, say, okay, is there a compensating mechanism I can put? Like, so for example, can I stop this at the entrance with, like, for example, like a solution like I just talked about before from our CloudGuard application security solution. So I have time to patch things. So people need to have virtual patching in place, at least the ability to do virtual patching, because patching 10,000 servers is going to be really hard. And also look for solutions that really do not rely on reactive mechanisms, or at least do not rely only on reactive mechanisms. I think that's where the future lies. It's been like that. We've been talking about this for 30 years, right? Or 20
Virtual
years.
patching's been around for a decade over, right? Yeah.
Right, yeah. And but it's tough. In the application security world, it's really tough. It just shows you the 100 times problem, by the way. If you, like 10 years ago, you would have 100 servers to deal with. Okay, so you would send David and he would fix it. Today, you literally, someone clicked a button a year ago and you have 10,000 servers.
Right.
And then 50,000 functions and whatever. So it's a really tough situation. You have to think proactive. You have to think really beyond. You have to assume that you'll find something like that. And you need to have the mechanisms in place to do either virtual patching or preventive mechanisms that do not rely on signatures.
Right. And I guess the real difficult, it sounds easy enough, but a lot of these things are degrees of an attack, looking like an attack. It takes time, maybe a series of events have to come together to actually confirm this is not good.
Right, right. False positive is the biggest. So, I mean, you're touching on a very important topic. I think this whole industry has been forever sort of a compromise between how stringent you want to be versus false positive and stopping business.
Right.
I think that the pendulum, by the way, shifted dramatically over the last 5 years, specifically in this world of cloud, because listen, let's be frank, cloud just proved forever that the developer owns the world. Us security people, we're servants right now. The developer owns the world. Amazon calls them builders, right? If you call them a developer, they'll be insulted. They're builders. They're not developers. They're the building. What are we, by the way, if they're building? We're just
plumbers, electricians, huh?
Exactly. And our best job, by the way, in order for us to do our job, I always say to people, the job of the security officer or the security administrator in 2022 is to stay out of the way. That's sort of his job description, right? Just stay out of my way. So how does that work with stopping, preventing, failing a deploy? The sensitivity to false positives, we used to be able to say, hey, man, you can't do this. And I'm going to stop this because you remember the concept of fail open, fail close? There was a concept, hey, stop it. Today, no, man, you're not stopping anything. You're alerting, like it's fail open. If you see a problem, let it in, call me, and I'll tell you if it's really a problem. So the accuracy for the sensitivity for false positives, stopping things became really, really high. So again, when you measure a technology, that's part, and I think for your customers or for people listening, that's another thing in the times 100 world. You have to measure business disruption as a key criteria for your security. It's not like a lot of the times. I remember when I did my company, we talked about it earlier. I remember one customer took our solution, and it was a serverless security solution, and he ran a normal pen test on it. Now, in a normal pen test, our stuff didn't stop things because they just cannot exist in a serverless world. He tried a normal type of attack pattern. He just used the normal pen test tool. And I remember trying to explain to him that we do not stop things that we know are not attacks, even if we fail a pen test, because they just can't happen. And the idea was that we are way more diligent around not stopping things we shouldn't be stopping, because in the cloud world, the developer rules, and he doesn't want to hear about problems that are not real problems. So part of the criteria has to be how accurate security is. It's not about if you catch 1,000 things. It's about catching the right 100.
Right. Yep.
And it's a big topic. No, Node4j by Log4j is the same problem. You can turn on a signature in your traditional web application firewall. You'll just get 1,000 false positives.
Right. And that kind of goes along. You mentioned, the old world was fail open, fail close. That was a firewall rule for 20 years now, right? What do you do, right? Now you kind of got this to the application level, more like the zero trust network architecture. How do you, instead of trust but verify, now verify then trust?
Right.
Kind of flip-flopping, but that's harder to do when you start coming to things like the cloud, where you're the front end, trying to protect the front end of the world, server world, or a website to the whole world. It's much more difficult to.
It's way different. Of course. Yeah, I do think though, you touched on zero trust. I do think that to a large extent, the concept of zero trust, by the way, is a term that got totally abused over the last 3 years. Everything is zero trust. Like if I want to say to my kids that they're behaving, I'll tell them, hey man, you're such a zero trust kid. Like you're amazing. You're zero trust. Everything is zero trust. But in reality, I think that the concept of list privilege, which is really, you and I have been around for more than a minute. Zero trust is just a cool term for list privilege. Man, I'm just going to give you exactly what you need, or at least the minimum that you need to do your job. Whatever you are, you're a user, you're a machine, you're whatever. And I think that concept, and by the way, and again, in my company originally, that's where we put a lot of effort, is you want to be able to say, you want to be able to allow to come to the machine or the entity or the user to do just what they need. That's really the concept of zero trust, least privilege. So I think if you go back to the 100 times 100 problem, that's really the most effective way. Theoretically, if you know the minimum that you need, I'm just going to give it to you. And if I can be really accurate with it, which is where the problem is, right? Usually, I can be really accurate with it and adapt with time. That is the most secure thing. So if an application, if a container inside an application only needs to talk with the data, there's only one microservice that needs to talk with the database. Theoretically, you should allow only that microservice to talk with the database. Period. Right? Now, if you can, the problem is again in the times 100. How the hell do you do that? Who's going to sit there and configure which microservice needs access to the database where the developer just changed the application yesterday? If there's no, or now is changing it again and again and again and again. So you have to automate. It goes back to automation. So list privilege or zero trust is worth nothing in the cloud world without automation. I've seen solutions over the last 5 years. They show you these great maps of your application and they map the application and then they tell you, hey, sit down and write, like, think about it, like firewall rules. Source destination. Dude, there's no way. You've seen the, you all know, you've seen the Netflix map for microservices. You know that famous picture that there's like, I can't remember now, but 1 billion nodes interconnected. Who's going to sit down and configure machine A1000 can talk with this one, this can talk with, and tomorrow they can talk with others. So again, automation, zero trust.
A factorial problem, right? It's 1,000 factorial. The permutation numbers are just crazy.
It's crazy. You put a map today. I remember the good old days. You remember the good old days? We had a map of our network architecture on the wall. You just imagine how this thing looks like today. It's insane. It's insane. And what would you do with this map? You need this frames, like the picture frames that change automatically, because it changes every 5 seconds.
Continuously discovering.
So it's all about, again, it comes back to automation. At the end of the day.
So that's very interesting. And I guess the other big news event that just happened recently last week was the whole AWS just disappearing for a while.
Man.
Any comments on how that could play into security, or availability is part of security? So
I think it plays a lot into, by the way, it's really interesting. I can tell you as a security vendor, we run our services, our SaaS. I mean, think about security. I would guess, my guess, I'm just throwing a number, 9 out of 10 security SaaS companies run on Amazon. Okay. So probably I'm not wrong by a lot, right? Because like if you're a tech cool company, you probably start with Amazon. And then, so just think about it. And by the way, most of them probably run in the Virginia data center, just because that's where everybody starts also. So 9 out of 10 SaaS startups ran in the data center or the region that fell down. So here's a security problem to you. Like you're running 10 tools, 9 out of them are down. Granted.
That's a big area. That's a big impact. That's a big issue.
It's a huge issue. I don't think it's been talked about, really. If you think about it, people, obviously your might be down, but your services might run in Amazon West. Actually, your services might run on Azure. But your security provider runs on Amazon. And he's down. Because his SaaS is down. So, so that's a huge topic. So you want to build in
denial of service attack where they actually just went away.
Seriously, it is. I mean, think about it. If you take Amazon, really, I think we're giving tips to some people in Russia now. But if you take Amazon East down, you're taking 90% of the security world down.
Wow.
Like startups, you're taking them down. Now everybody else,
about that yet. Yeah, all these tools that are controlled by out of those clouds, yeah, are all of a sudden just not functional. It's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
So I think, so back to that, I think you're going to see this. And by the way, this is the second event that happened in Amazon in the last 3 months. There was another event 2 months ago that took down dramatically a bunch of services in the same region, by the way, in Amazon. And again, took down a lot of companies, a lot of SaaS companies, and also obviously also security SaaS companies. Yeah, I think you're going to see more and more. So the tech is not there today to make it really easy to build a cross-region, true multi-cloud application. It's a real issue. Today, if you want to develop an app, it's much easier to do it cloud native running on one cloud. It takes whatever, 10% of the time than to develop an application that is cloud agnostic. Because you want to use all these great services that Amazon provides. You don't want to develop a database. You don't want to develop messaging service. You don't want to develop all that stuff. So it's very much easier. So there's a real trade-off. I do think that you're going to see, just like we talked a bit about that earlier, but I think just like you're going to see these companies that are sort of abstracting the network layer, right? For companies, you're going to start and seeing, I'm assuming, and if it doesn't happen, then I'll just have to do another startup. Companies that are abstracting the application layer. So they're going to allow you to develop cloud native applications that are at least cross-region. Even that is really hard today. Forget cross-cloud. Cross-region is really hard. To develop your application in a way that it can run. I mean, just look at it. Netflix went down.
Right. Yep.
And Netflix, trust me, they know cloud.
Right. Yep.
Right? It's really hard to develop a cross-region application right now, even within Amazon, not to talk about cross-cloud application. So you're going to see more companies moving there, and there's probably going to be technologies that help. Right now, this proves again that people will sacrifice comfort for security every day, right? Every day. It's just so much faster to develop it in one region, one cloud.
So that brings up an interesting point is, when you are developing in one cloud like that, and you have system providers versus using their native tools or a point provider, what would you be careful about doing to, when would you use native security functions versus like a checkpoint that provides more broad system-wide services?
Yeah, I think that it really, by the way, that question changes, I would say, even between cloud providers. Because like if you look at the AWS, they're very rudimentary in their services because they're building for developers. They're not building security solutions for security people. They're building them for DevOps people. So if you're a security admin, you're not gonna like the UI on Amazon. It's just not built for you. Azure has way more, I would say, productized security offerings. But back to your original question, I think that you're gonna see, if you're a one cloud SaaS company, let's say, your cloud native one cloud, you're going to find the evolution is just like that. You'll be able to check the box and get your basic security with the cloud native tools. And that might be in some cases the fastest way to check the box, right? And I think, but when, let's take posture management, for example, you can use the AWS solution for posture management. It's sort of rudimentary. You'll check the box. You're not going to get really full coverage for the services. You're not going to get customization capabilities. You're not going to get a dashboard. It's going to be very hard to manage, but you can check the box. So I think for companies that just want a simple solution and they're one cloud, some services from the cloud providers are going to do it. But we don't see that it's not cheaper. It's not cheaper. You pay for everything on it. By the way, AWS are the masters of charging for everything. So you're paying for stuff. So people say, I'm going to use the cloud native. So, yeah, and what? So what? What do you think? It's free? You're paying for everything. Actually, a lot of the times you're paying way more than you would pay for a third-party tool because everything is based on traffic and stuff like that. And you're going to get less. So I think you're going to see, I don't see a lot of, the only places where I think that there's a real sort of discussion is where companies that the security team is developers. When the security team is run by developers, then they feel very comfortable with the native tools, just because these are tools that they just feel like another AWS service that they turn on, right? When it's security people, the native tools are just too rudimentary. They're just too rudimentary. I think what you're going to see though, Kirk, and that's actually where I think a lot of the future, speaking about innovation, by the way, it's very high on our agenda in Checkpoint CloudGuard, is to leverage native tools and plug them into our platform as a source. So for example, I'll give you a great example right now. Amazon just launched a service called, so they launched it a while ago, Inspector, and now they launched Inspector 2.0, which basically gives you a view of all your machines, virtual machines in the Amazon environment, plus their vulnerability situation. Like they literally scan the machines, okay, and tell you which ones are vulnerable. By itself, I don't know what you would do with it. But as an input to a cloud security posture management system, really interesting. So why would you deploy another agent in your environment to scan these machines if Amazon does it natively, right? So use this as a source, put it in your cloud security posture management system. And now when you look at your situation or your status, you can also see inputs from Inspector in the context of your full picture for compliance. So I think you're going to see more and more people integrating the cloud native tools into something that is actually usable in the bigger context. So that's definitely going to happen. And yeah, some people will turn on the AWS service and be fine with it, just because sometimes you don't even get to the alternative. You know what I mean? It's just there, so you turn it on, and then you don't know if it's better or worse or misses something. You just turn it on.
Yep. So now if you get into the multi-cloud world, I got to have people that know Amazon, I got people that know Azure, Google Cloud.
That's easy. Then it becomes easy, right? Okay. Yeah. Then there's no discussion. If you're in a multi-cloud environment, you need to get a platform that can cover multi-cloud, and you want to have consistent policies. You want to have a single dashboard where you see your situation across everything. You want to ask about, it becomes relatively easy because you're seeing a user and you say, hey, Kirk, what does he have access to?
Right.
I don't want to look at the AWS console, the Azure console, at the GCP console, and then understand. No, I want to look at one place and understand what does he have access to. Or you want to see one service that runs across multi-cloud environment. What's its posture? Multi-cloud is really easy. I don't think the cloud providers play in that. They're really playing in what you mentioned earlier. They play in, you're already all in AWS, turn this thing on. Sure. But again, where it becomes really interesting is when the AWS has a service called Macy, which a lot of people know. It looks for anomalies in certain Amazon services. Azure has a similar service. You want to take information from both and put them in a multi-cloud security system, feed them into a multi-cloud security system so you have more inputs. But I think by themselves, I don't see how security team, life is hard as it is.
Sure.
Like we said, it's 100 times problem. You don't need 100 times tools.
Sure. Well, you've already said. Yep. The multi-cloud creates 100 times problems itself, it sounds like. In some ways.
Exactly.
Where do you see these other things now that are getting pulled into security? Obviously, the whole Internet of Things revolution that's kind of causing this whole processor shortage across the world, right, and operational technologies. How do you see all this stuff, kind of shaken out from a security perspective a few years down the road? What kind of tools are you going to need, or how do you see that integrating in with traditional IT security, or is it going to remain separate?
Yeah, I think for a while it's going to stay separate because the type of companies that deal with these things. But just like everything, there's going to be serious consolidation. I think in a few years from now, we're starting to see it. It's going to be very hard to separate between a SaaS backend and the front end, which is just a thing, right? Like something with a processor. Tesla is a great example, right? Like what is it? It's a SaaS, like literally it's a SaaS company. And that the end device instead of a computer is a thing. It's a machine. Right. It's a car. Right. But so I think that you're going to see consolidation. Listen, I think that what we first have to imagine is that the attack surface is just. This is what's from a security perspective. Again, when you put your mind to it, it's literally a miracle that not every day something totally bad happens because the attack surface has expanded.
Huge.
10,000-fold in the last 10 years.
Right.
Like to your point, everything is an attack surface. It runs software. It might have vulnerabilities. It's connected to, now at the beginning, it wasn't even connected to the internet. Now it's like literally always connected.
Right.
So that attack surface, and then the cloud and the services and the microservices and the speed. So the attack surface is increasing dramatically. I think that for OT and so I would separate OT and IoT just because I think OT by itself is just a thing. It's a segment. It's like saying cloud security. There's different attack patterns. There's different devices. The signature, everything looks different. The way that the entry points to the systems look different. So I think OT is going to be a segment, just like cloud is a segment. And IoT, I think, is going to get at some point sort of integrated into a bigger picture of securing your application, just like we used to do endpoint security. So you need to secure the thing, but that thing, the biggest entry point to that thing is going to be the SaaS, right? That's the only thing that talks with the thing.
The front end.
So I think it's going to be consolidated over time. It's going to take some time. You know, like you look at mobile security, it's really interesting, right? Like we have probably, according to Forrester and a bunch of others, like the best mobile endpoint security solution out there. Still, it's a very nascent market.
Yep.
Right. It took a long time. People still feel comfortable, right? Even though they read in the news that NSO can send a text message and take over their phone, there's still very, very little attention to that thing. So I think with IoT in the commercial sort of end user space, it's going to take time to evolve and get to mass market. You're going to see a lot of that in specific markets. I think it's going to be very segmented, like connected cars.
Mm-hmm.
I think people get it, right? Like you understand that an attack can. I think even I mentioned that when I was in Lambeau Field, like that.
Yeah.
Just imagine you waking up, turning on your car, putting your kids in the back, and turning on the car, the automated car that just the autonomous car that just got an update yesterday, and you drive to school.
Right.
Man, an attack. It's you and your kids in the back, right? Like you need to rely on so many things to go right,
right,
or for something bad not to happen.
Right.
So I think there's verticals that are going to lead the way in adopting security, and then it's going to evolve into more IoT stuff. But day one is going to be critical applications, I would say. But the end result is very bad.
Sure. Now, Checkpoint, obviously the original pioneer in the enterprise firewall, right? Way back 25 years ago.
Yeah, 30.
30. That's a long time. It's been around forever.
Right.
So, if you need to tell somebody, I know Checkpoint's got some unique differentiators in some of their cloud solutions. I think they got some relationships like with Azure and things. Right. What should they know about Checkpoint? What's going on, and why should they, if they haven't looked at Checkpoint in a while, why should they, look at Checkpoint?
Yeah, so first you're right, 30 years, and Gil Shwed, who's still the CEO of Checkpoint, by the way.
Good point.
Founder and CEO, longest serving CEO on NASDAQ, by the way, and he founded the company. He literally invented the firewall.
Right.
Literally invented, by the way, a bunch of other stuff. He's a fascinating man. He invented product-led growth. He invented a lot of stuff that didn't exist 30 years ago, weren't even an acronym. But since then, obviously, the market has changed dramatically from a security landscape perspective. I think there's two things people need to remember about Checkpoint, which is, I was surprised, again, like I came through an acquisition, right? So I'm a startup person. I've never, Checkpoint was not where I grew up. And I remember when I asked the leadership, what makes Checkpoint unique? I asked that, right?
Yeah, okay.
And literally, Dorit at the time, she's the head of, she's the SVP for product. She said, we're all about prevention. And at the time, it looked to me, to be honest, it looked to me like a buzzword. I said, well, okay, what does that mean even? And then when I joined Checkpoint, I started working, I saw how embedded it is into the DNA of the company to really focus on preventing bad things from happening. And actually, by the way, we talked about the Log4j thing. That's a very good example on that DNA of not just doing things because it's easy, not just doing things because they're cool, not just doing things because you can make them fast. It's really investing in kick-ass technology, taking the time to make sure that where Checkpoint puts stuff out, it's going to be preventative. It's going to save you a lot of trouble when actually, this is the non-PG-13 moment when the shit hits the fan, really, right? Right. And so that's number one. Now, I think the other thing is we've really, as a company, you have to go through these evolutions in time. So cloud changes a lot of stuff, and cloud is a mindset. it's not even just a technology. Obviously, it shifts a lot of technology, but that mindset of moving faster, being more agile, and automating stuff is something that is now becoming another core to Check Point. So it's automated prevention. It's not just prevention, it's automated prevention. And that is a very big, so I think for people who are looking into solving these big problems at large scale, you really want to join forces with someone, with a vendor that puts prevention as a first class citizen, because you actually want to stop. You don't have time to detect and react. Just there's no time. It's just that's it. It's toast. It's all. And then the second thing, because you don't have time, you want to automate, like we mentioned, the presence and the actual policies. And that's two core things to Check Point. So a lot of the innovation, by the way, we won't have time to go over this today, but if people want to hear more, they can definitely reach out to you guys. There's a lot of our effort, and what we're bringing out is about automating prevention. We've always been about prevention. Now it's about automating prevention, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud. So these are the two things that make Check Point different, and we're continuously investing into them.
Sure. And like you said, the devil's in the details, right? Because that automation may be 3 or 4 or 5 different things that have to correlate to figure out if it is something. And that's
and Check Point, again, another thing, by the way, to that point is always been around one platform across everything. So even if with my company or what we've done in the cloud, there's one cloud platform. So we make acquisitions, we take the time to really integrate them into the platform, because you want to have a single tool to go across everything, because really it's impossible to automate 10,000 different tools. It's just impossible. So, and that's been true also outside the cloud. But yeah, these are the key elements. So listen, I think for security people out there today, this is such a tough environment. Really, it's really a tough environment. They need all the help they can get from people who understand the space, people who can help them get there, and people that can help them automate. There's just the amount of moving parts is just insane right now. This is I think the toughest that security has ever been, even though there's so much investment in it. It's just you're outnumbered. You're really outnumbered. And you're not outnumbered by the attackers. You're outnumbered by the developers.
Don't know any better. They are attackers by default.
They are.
So that brings up an interesting, I wrote this down earlier, where we're all slaves to the developers, and that these developers are wearing goatees and flip-flops.
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like you see it all. You're seeing kind of the old way that the business was being done and security was being done in the new way. What advice do you have for a security team, or maybe a CISO, on kind of how to adapt to this new dynamic?
Right. Man, it's such a great question. First I say, as a CISO, right, go hug a developer. Like, you seriously need to go find a developer next to you. And I know you don't like them a lot of the times because they do whatever they want, they don't care, they're spoiled, they get the big bucks, and you're feeling like, go find one, give him a big ass hug, and tell him, listen, I get it. I get it. I totally get it. You need to move fast. You're trained to move fast. Actually, people celebrate it when you move fast. I get it. I want to allow you to move fast. This is what I do. My job is to let you move fast. I'm not about guardrails. By the way, this term guardrails, us in security, Kirk will tell you, guardrails is sort of like our second name. Such a terrible thing. When I think guardrails, I think electric fences. I go to the fence and I get that's such a bad term. I think like roadblocks and stuff. No, dude, I want to build a paved road for you. My job, Mr. Developer, after that big hug, is to build a paved road for you, that it is easier to do the right thing than the wrong thing. I want to understand how you work. How do you deploy applications? Which tools do you use? If there's something wrong with the way that you try to do something, where do you want to get the remediation alert? Is it in do you want me to send you an email? Do you want it to Slack? Do you want it in Jira? Where do you want it? Understand the way they work, so you stop doing guardrails and you build a paved road for them. Think about Netflix. We mentioned Netflix a moment ago. Everybody, so I grew up in Israel. Everybody pirates in Israel. Like, nobody paid ever for any on-demand video. Until Netflix. You know why? It became easier to do the right thing.
Right.
It's just easier to do the right thing. So as a security officer, you have to understand the way they operate, the tools that they use, where do they want to consume security information in order to make it easier to do the right thing. If it's easier to do the right thing and to consume security for them in their language, you'll be a winner. Or on the other, and then I would say on the flip side, after you finished hugging that dev guy, right? Then you go back to your office and you say, okay, I hugged him and I'm going to give him tools, but he still might do something crazy. So I need to build autonomous systems that protect independently of what this guy did. So on one hand, it's sort of the trust and no trust zone. On the trust zone, you give the developers tools to do the right thing, integrate into their CI/CD pipelines, into their IDE environment, into whatever, right? You do that. And then on the runtime environment, which is sort of the no trust zone, you put autonomous solutions, similar to what we talked about with the application security stuff, that protect automatically, they're there automatically, and protect automatically, independent of what the developer did. So that's sort of the thing. You can't avoid them. You have to understand them, and you can't think in your language. You have to think in the developer language. And there's a whole world right now that's getting created. By the way, it's a huge topic of developer-first security tools.
Yep.
We're investing heavily into that. Heavily. We have a whole shift left area in our CloudGuard platform, which is sort of tools that we understand the user is not a security person, is a DevOps person or a developer, and they consume things differently, they look at things differently. It's a very different mindset, and even the people that we have building these tools, by the way, are not your typical security product people, right? They're more they understand developer more than they understand a security administrator. So, there's no, like, you talk with a developer, he doesn't want a UI with drag and drop, and like, it's a UI. What the hell is a UI? I need a CLI, I need an API, and it's it's a very different mindset. So anyway, so bottom line, go hug a developer and ask him how his day is going and what does he do, how does he work? And then understand how you build a paved road and stop talking about all this stuff you're going to put in his way to make it slower. You want him to move fast. Yep. That's what the developer wants to hear. So you need to hug him.
All right.
Great.
Last question I have is Bitcoin buy now or hold?
I'm a holder. I'm a huge holder. I'm buying, but I don't know. Listen, I don't know what will happen with this thing. I just think that I can tell you one thing. I think that I am personally too old to understand some of these revolutions. I just know that I told you I have a son that works so I have 3 sons, right? So I have 13, 19, and 24, right? So my 24 years old would never buy gold. Never. It sounds stupid to him. And there's no way, there's nothing I can do to explain to him the value of gold. But he holds Bitcoin.
Right.
And I can't explain it to him. I said, no, dude, gold. It's always been there, 5,000 years. He says, yeah, also going from place to place with horses and carriages. But that's gone. So yeah, holder.
I got to throw this out there before we go away. What do you think about this whole Facebook metaverse and all that? And where's that?
I love it, man. I think I am. So I'm. It's funny. I wasn't. So I have some Facebook stock, but not. I didn't have a lot, and I actually went deeper after the Meta move because I felt that I love people and companies that are mission driven. That they sort of, like, I know where they have a vision of where they're going to land.
Right.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, sort of when we say the definition of done, it's automated, so you have a definition of done. Mm-hmm. Like, I think when they changed the name to Meta and they said metaverse, that put things for me into perspective that they have, so Mark Zuckerberg and his team, they have sort of a vision.
Yep.
That they are working towards. If you look, I would ask you, what's the vision of Google? I don't think you can articulate it right now. You would say they'll continue to search, YouTube, whatever, they engage with user. There's no definition of done, right? When Zuckerberg put Meta, I said, oh, you have a definition of done. Now you have a definition of done. You're seeing it's like Elon Musk, by the way, is definitely a definition of done type person, right? Like, oh my God, like sometimes extreme, but he has a goal. So I love it. I think, by the way, metaverse is already happening. We're doing a metaverse thing like right here. I think that we got an experiment with COVID that showed how adaptive we are to this virtual world, right? And extremely adaptive. And I think, again, back to my son, it's just gonna get they're gonna be so comfortable with things that we are uncomfortable with today. So anyway, so I love the vision. I think I get it, I understand it. I don't fully know what's gonna happen, but I think there's only one company right now that says, hey, I think the world is gonna get there, and I'm gonna be a big part there. So yeah, I like it. This is not financial advice, by the way.
Or Checkpoint official company policy.
Definitely not.
TJ, I appreciate your time today. It was awesome to host this conversation. We have another podcast about the history of SynerComm, and Checkpoint was a major part of that.
Oh,
so
awesome.
It's good to have this talk.
That's
I
great.
appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. It's always fun. Hope to
Thanks
do it
catching up, TJ. It was a lot of fun.
Take care. Thank you.
Talk to you.